Everybody, we're here in New York City. Very excited for our guest today. We have Ethan Aaron, founder of Portable.io.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Excited for the conversation today.
Yeah, Ethan, we met last week at a Snowflake Summit in Las Vegas. It was definitely a great time networking and seeing all the data people that we've only seen on Zoom for the last 1 to 2 years. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on a Snowflake Summit.
Totally. I think for me, that was the summary. Like, there were a lot of great technologies there, a lot of great vendors, a lot of practitioners. But the most exciting part to me was just the people I've been interacting with in Slack communities, on LinkedIn, over Zoom calls, and actually putting a face to the name. And what I realized was a lot of the conversations that we've been having for 2+ years were at a very high level. When you actually sit down and you grab coffee with someone, or you grab a beer with someone, like, there's a lot to talk about right now in the data world. So that to me was the most exciting part about Snowflake Summit, was everyone from the ecosystem in one place at one time, excited to talk.
Yeah, it was definitely a big reunion, and I think it was also a good milestone in terms of the maturity of the data stack, and we were talking about that. And speaking of the data stacks and modern data stack, you were just recently on a podcast with Joe Reese, their Monday Data Chat. Would you like to get into what you talked about there?
Totally. So something I posted last week on LinkedIn has gotten quite a bit of traction, saying the modern data stack is dead. And talked at length about this on Monday. Feel free to check out the recording there. But at the highest level, the problem I see with the modern data stack as we know it today is everyone views it as a holistic solution. You buy all these tools, you put them all in place at once, and you are done with data. It's great. Everything's there. Now go solve the business problems. And it's causing some problems right now. People are investing in too much technology up front and not focusing on business problems until later on. And it doesn't represent the journey most data teams are going through. Like, data is a journey. When you get started, if you are a company that does not know anything about data, and maybe you're using Excel spreadsheets, maybe you're not even doing that, you should not be thinking about 30 tools in a modern data stack. You should be thinking about, how do you get started? Like, maybe it's Excel. Maybe it is a data stack in a box. Maybe it's a consultant. And then from there, you can slowly add tools as you generate business value. So I think the key things that I see going on the market right now are, it's not just one big set of 30 tools that you need to implement overnight. It is a journey people need to understand, and that journey needs to correspond to actual business value. You need to be informing better decisions, automating workflows, or building data products. Otherwise, you are wasting time.
Yeah, and that last point you had on data products, can you tell the listeners a bit about that?
Totally. So what we've seen in the data world over the last few years, and Snowflake made announcements, but also just a lot of focus around their Powered by Snowflake product. What we're starting to see is, as the data ecosystem matures and it's easier to pull data into analytics environments or processing environments like Snowflake or Databricks, as it's easier to transform and govern the data you're moving, and as it's easier to build dashboards and insights, but also power workflows, in addition to using that internally to build dashboards to run your own business or automate your own workflows, people are looking at that being like, wait a second, I can build an entire company on this. I can build a product that is an analytics product for e-commerce. And all you need is connectors to data sources, a place to process the data, and dashboards, and a user interface for your clients. Like, you can build entire products on top of that. There are definitely scenarios where you shouldn't use the data stack as we know it today, or at least the modern data stack as we know it today. But you can effectively build entire products, or at least MVPs of products and POCs, in a matter of days with off-the-shelf tooling in today's world. And that to me is, it's going to cause a lot of innovation, but it's also going to cause a lot of requirements for new technologies, because a lot of the modern data stack is not built for product development. So
yeah, absolutely. And me personally, as a product guy, I love the evolution and coining of the term data products, because ultimately forces you to apply product thinking to your data initiatives.
So,
think about the end users, think about the actual business use cases, the ROI. What does success mean for this data product? But it also goes a little bit beyond that, where I've seen people define, data product almost like a microservice. If you read the Data Mesh book by Zhamak Dehghani, there's a lot of talk about data products, and I recommend everybody go read that and get her take on it. But also just seeing that adopted in the enterprise. Last night here in New York, Stream hosted a dinner sponsored by Google Cloud and a few CTOs and chief data officers in the data community. Now, when you see them present their architecture diagrams, you actually see data products with all the use cases in mind. And when an enterprise builds out, like, I'm just going to use, quote unquote, a modern data stack, they don't call it that. But when they migrate to like cloud data warehouses, it's always super phased, right? It's like 3, 6 months, 9 months. They're doing one data set at a time. And when you're talking about, millions of dollars on the line and already existing production workloads going to the cloud, I mean, you have to show business value, and there's also a lot of risk mitigation going on too. So like, how do, smaller companies and mid-market companies and maybe companies that are more in the growth stage kind of look at the data stacks going forward?
Totally. I think it all comes back to, like, sure, you can invest millions of dollars in a data stack to get started. But to your point, it's a phased approach. Like, you can invest, hopefully you don't invest millions of dollars and then see what happens at the end of that. Hopefully you set a goal and be like, great, 3 months from now, this is the objective. Can we get there as an MVP? Then here's the goal 6 months after. This actually reminds me, did you see the Reddit thread a few weeks ago where someone did this? I don't know who it was inside the organization, but they spent millions of dollars on a project, stood up an entire data organization, consultants, internal people, to effectively build like a financial reporting platform. And the thing they missed was they didn't phase it in, and I don't think they set the right expectations.
Sure.
Because when you build a financial reporting product, like the goal there was actual financial reporting. How do you understand and balance your assets, liabilities, equity? How do you create a cash flow statement? When you think about products separately than when you think about just dashboards and insights, products, you need to understand what you're building. And the funny thing about that Reddit thread and why it got so much publicity was all of it was great up until the last minute when it didn't balance. Like, there were transactions that were missing. And it's one of those things when you think about data as a product and when you think about building products in general, you need to understand what your goals are. And I think in the data world, in the internal dashboards world, it's historically been more flexible. You can throw a dashboard together and be like, it's good enough. And I do this internally. Like, in most internal analytics use cases, like, good enough is fine to get started. If something's not correct, you can update it and add more governance around it. But when you think about building products for external consumers or for enterprises, you need to make sure that you actually set those objectives up front and that you phase them in, because you don't want to go $2 million in and find out it does not work for your goal. You want to get 3 months in, check a box, another 6 months in, check a box, another 2 years in, check a box. And it does start to look a lot like the product development lifecycle of product and engineering teams.
And that's good. That's a good thing. Okay, I totally know which Reddit thread you're talking about now. And I think that one also, they were going to the community and asking like, hey, we're missing transactions and my job is on the line. Is that the same one? They were worried about the fact that they were missing transactions in their reporting stack, and they basically had people complaining to them.
Totally. But instead of thinking about, I think what I really found insightful out of that conversation was, to a certain extent, like the cultural changes that are taking place between, hey, we hired a data team as an investment and we think it will pay off one day in the future. Today, that's not how things are working. Today, it's like, we hired a data team to deliver a product. Like, there are concrete deliverables we expect to get to. And that level of expectation setting comes with pros and cons. Like, you need products that can deliver on that. You need teams that are accountable for that. And you need paths to actually get there. I think it is a maturity. It's a maturing of the data ecosystem and the cultures of a lot of these teams that's taking place right now.
Yeah, and Ethan, that's why your perspective is so great. You're looking at the macro. You're looking at the overall landscape. Because when I see missing transactions, my first reaction is get in the weeds and be like, well, why are you like, did you skip something in your write ahead logs? Do you have to reinstantiate?
Yep.
Was the system down?
Oh, we thought about that too. Maybe it was a cursor offset or something. Yeah.
There was something they were doing like it's very easy to get ingestion wrong. And I think
Totally.
And from that standpoint, we'd love to ask about Portable. Tell us what Portable is doing.
Totally. So when you think about it, someone like Stream, very phenomenal for moving massive amounts of data from one system to another in real time. When you think about Portable, we don't focus on that. We don't focus on moving database data into your Snowflake environment or into BigQuery. We don't focus on your big data sources like Salesforce. We focus on the unbelievable complexity of pulling data from random APIs. So that could be a talent acquisition system. It could be a affiliate marketing tool, e-commerce platforms, esports, gaming platforms, in scenarios where a data team wants data into their data warehouse, but they don't want to write code, manage infrastructure, learn an open source framework, or be on call when things break. They just request the connector from us. They say, hey, can you build this tool? And we'll look into it. We can build no code connectors for users in a matter of hours or days. And then they simply log in, put in their API token or authenticate, put in their Snowflake credentials and say, move my data to Snowflake. And it's a cloud hosted SaaS product, but building connectors on demand for those teams. So I read a lot of API documentation in a nutshell. That's my job on a daily basis.
Love that. And I think what Portable has mastered is the operational efficiency of launching new connectors super fast. So that's definitely unique to the market.
Totally.
And it's been fun to watch your journey. I've been following your LinkedIn for a long time, and Portable always looked interesting. So it seems like
Totally.
you've hit that traction, and it's going to be super valuable to data practitioners to just have something like Portable where like, hey, I need to add something super quickly, and your team's great at delivering. Because as we see further adoption of centralization of data, and then we're getting back into decentralization now, which is a different topic, but people are going to want to add more and more types of data into the warehouse, and I've seen this pain point for sure. So, and I think that there's players like Stream who focus on like a couple very hard to parse data sets.
Totally.
And then you have other SaaS ETL players who are really focused on like Salesforce and HubSpot.
Yep.
But who's really looking at like the long tail of integrations?
Totally. And to your point, the fascinating part is if you look at the very highest level, it's all ETL. Like you're getting data from one system, doing some basic transformation or heavyweight transformation, and loading it into another tool. Like all of the tools you just mentioned, like we're all in the same bucket or category. But from how do you build your business, it's wildly different. Like those three categories of change data capture and streaming, kind of the big ETL players that focus on kind of the top 100, like the Salesforce, QuickBooks of the world, and then the long tail where we focus. As to your point, like you focus on a handful of very large, very, very complicated problems. And it's like, you need to go very deep into what's going on there. The middle tier, kind of the big ELT platforms focus on a bigger set of technologies, but it's still kind of a defined problem set.
Yeah.
For us, when you start talking, like right now we have almost 250 connectors. So when you think about like, that's a technical problem, 100%, but it is an operational problem. Our business is an operations business more so than anything else. Like when you do, just to put that in perspective, when you write documentation, I've written the documentation for all of our connectors. When you write documentation 250 times, if it takes you 1 minute, that's 250 minutes. If it takes you 10 minutes, it's 10x that. If it takes you 100 minutes, like you're talking head count at that point.
Yeah.
And we're only at 250. Like when we are like, there are thousands of
250
systems.
connectors?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
We're like 245 right now.
Okay.
But when you get to like we plan to get to thousands of connectors. And the only way to get to thousands of anything is operations. Like it's an efficiency game. It's a technical game. Like you can't just throw stuff at the wall and hope it works. But like for us, like the biggest difference between us and Stream or us and some of the big ELT platforms is that like our focus is operational efficiency above and beyond everything else.
Yeah. So Portable is super interesting addition to not the modern data stack because it's dead.
Right now, placeholder is postmodern data stack. We will come up with a better name as kind of ideas solidified, but It's the journey. We are part of the journey. When you get started, you probably don't need Portable.
Yeah.
But once you've stood up your first ELT platform, your data warehouse, and you have some dashboards, and someone comes to you and says, hey, I need insights into who's on vacation this week. Can you pull that from our HR engagement platform? That's when we come into play. Or, hey, you're an e-commerce platform and you already have Shopify connected, but you actually need 5 other tools. That's when we can help. But like, if you're getting started, I'm happy to make recommendations for who to start with, because it's probably not us.
Yeah. And, I think that's one of the other developments in the industry that a data engineer has to think about, is that there's over 1,000 popular enterprise and, mid-market SaaS apps now.
Totally.
And, I think you're ultimately going to want the data warehouse to be the source of truth. You don't want all these fragmented SaaS applications having some of your customer data, having some of your employee data, having some of your, logistics data. No, I mean, I think this is why things like Snowflake and BigQuery and Synapse and Redshift are so popular, is that, they just want one single source of truth, which is, and I think we've talked about single source of truth before, which is, it's not a state, it's more of a journey.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah. It's one of the interesting conversations taking place right now is, can you centralize everything, or will it be decentralized, more of like a data mesh type of approach? And it's interesting. I personally believe that in a few years, everything will be able to flow through a centralized processing environment, whether it's called a warehouse or a lake house or a house lake or whatever you want to call it. Like, it's going to be something that can process data in both batch and real time at scale. But today there is still kind of a fragmentation between the 3 types of data use cases. Analytics, if you're building dashboards, you're probably using a data warehouse under the hood. If you're building data products, you might be using your own infrastructure or Spark or something of that sort. And then if you're powering workflows, like automated workflows, like, hey, if this happens, do this other task, a lot of that isn't going through the warehouse and can't yet even go through the warehouse. So I think we are seeing a convergence of these as things like reverse ETL are added, as more data sources and destinations are added. So that's one of the things I'm most excited to see in the coming years, is instead of having 2 different pipelines for your analytics and your operations, will those collapse? And how will they? I expect them to collapse, but how will they collapse? And then can you take the same data or the same pipelines and use it for your products? That's where a lot of real-time stuff comes into play. And we'll see. I'm excited for it. I think there is a way for it all to be piped out of a single source of truth, but today we're not there.
Yeah. And this is one of the things I've seen as well, where, we're reinventing the wheel from, infrastructure that existed in the 90s and early 2000s, but now we're reinventing the whole wheel, where, reverse ETL, traditionally, you've seen, Informatica and some of the legacy ETL players do something that's sort of the equivalent, but now you see reverse ETL players coming in and making it kind of the low friction, super easy to use, very SaaS native, digital native type of ecosystem of connectors. Where do you see reverse ETL going over the next few years?
I don't think you can look at reverse ETL as a standalone product right now.
Okay.
I think it is a awesome innovation. I think it turns the rest of the data stack into an operational data flow. Like, when you think about competing with Informatica or competing with any of the automation tools, even something like Zapier, what you need to be able to do is pull data from a data source, do something to it, and then ship it to a data destination. Until reverse ETL, you could get halfway there and then you had to write code. No one wants to write code if you don't have to. So reverse ETL unlocks the ability to use your analytics stack for operational use cases. The problem is, when you look at the whole, it's not a reverse ETL problem. It is a data stack problem. When you think about powering and automating your own data workflows through a data warehouse or a processing engine versus just point-to-point solutions, connectivity isn't there. So when you think about how many connectors someone like Zapier has, Zapier connects to over, I think it's about 3,000 different applications. If you look at the current state of ELT, and this is what we're trying to get the number up to thousands, but let's say it's closer to probably 500 right now. If you add us to some of the big ELT platforms, like, you can't compete when it comes to, hey, I need to automate a flow from here to here. So like when it comes to like you can do more advanced analytics and processing beforehand, which is super powerful for some use cases, but the connectivity in the data stack for analytics isn't there yet to compete. That's number one. The other thing that's fascinating is reverse ETL today, and I think over time it initially was use case agnostic. It was, we will take data from an analytics environment and activate it anywhere.
Yeah.
A lot of, because you have to prioritize in this world, a lot of it is collapsed back down into customer data. How do we activate customer data? And what that means is people are like, you can use your analytics environment to ingest, process, and activate customer data. So in addition to having a substitute, which is the automation iPaaS tools, you also have a separate substitute called customer data platforms. There are entire platforms that have been purpose-built from the ground up to ingest customer data, resolve identities, and activate it on behalf of marketing teams. So when you think about that use case, like there are actually 3 different paths right now. I think over time they will all converge, and they will all be backed by an ingest layer, a transform layer, and an activation layer, because then you can also power your dashboards out of the same thing. It's just seamless. But today, when you think about the offering of, hey, I want to ingest my customer data, process it, activate it, there's 3 different options, and each one of them has its own benefits. Like analytics-centric, warehouse-centric activation gives you the benefit of you can use all the queries your team already wrote. That's great. iPaaS and automation tools have the most connectivity right now and can do things in close to real time, point to point, not high volume data, but they can do that.
Just the API to API, basically.
Yeah. So it's like, if this happens, do this other thing. So they're great for those types of use cases. And CDPs have the attention of marketers. Like I came from the ad tech and MarTech world. Like marketers are different people than data people. Like they a lot of them don't know SQL. A lot of them do not want to manage infrastructure. A lot of them want to build segments and understand their customer view, and they need identity resolution. And I think right now, I think there's enough room for everyone, but I do think that they will converge. And you're starting to see this as CDPs add support to pull from data warehouses.
Yeah.
And as iPaaS and automation tools start adding support for data warehouses and calling themselves, or releasing reverse ETL solutions. So I think it's the biggest thing. I think it's a massive innovation for the ecosystem. The question is, we need to catch up fast, and to do so, we need connectivity. We need it to be easier for marketers to use, and it needs to. You shouldn't have to sign 10 different contracts with 10 different vendors to have to create a end-to-end solution.
Yeah, I think ultimately it's like a time function of making sure your data engineers are they're not spending too many resources on activating data. And when I was talking to one of my data engineering contacts who's more in the enterprise world, just migrated a massive fulfillment and billing systems to run on Snowflake and really knows his stuff.
Yep.
I was asking him, hey, are you looking at these reverse ETL SaaS tools? And he's like, no, like Informatica already does all this stuff, and I'm just going to use that. So I mean, like, if you're already licensed and trained on Informatica, which is definitely like a subset of the population, large subset. I mean, Informatica is huge, versus like maybe a SaaS native data team with 5-10 data engineers who have never touched Informatica in their lives. I mean, like my data team just started using High Touch and for reverse ETL and data activation, and I can't understate how easy it was to use, and how streamlined it is for you to start actually like using your models back in your SaaS applications. So I think that's going to be the difference, and I think that's also what makes Portable interesting, is like ultimately like not only the right tool for the right job, but like the right tool for the right team for the right job.
100%.
Where I think that
100%. Like it is a journey, and it's always like, it's not, hey, here's my product, do you want to buy it? It's like, hey, what is the state of your business? Like what you just mentioned there around having a team that is trained on Informatica, or a team that's trained on Talend, or a team that's trained on whatever that tool is for automation purposes. A lot of larger enterprises have teams that have a Informatica specialty. And there is a cultural aspect and a team aspect and a heavy people aspect of the future of the data stack, because a lot of larger companies have a data team for analytics. Job is build dashboards, like get data into a place and build dashboards. And they have a separate function for automating workflows that would hire Informatica specialists. And when you think about it, it's both a technical question of using something like Hightouch plus your data warehouse to power the same workflow. And then there is a cultural people aspect of it saying, hey, that's someone's job. Like someone's job is use Informatica. Their skill set is Informatica. It is not SQL and a reverse ETL platform. So like that's the other part where it shouldn't just be like, hey, this is the future, we're going to do this. It should be, how do we help different companies in different phases of the journey find the solution that's right for them, because it might be Informatica. But I think over time, I think we will see those teams converge, but it's not just a technical problem. Like there is a especially for big enterprises, there is a massive people consideration as well.
Definitely. And, I know you have some thoughts on the market and where we're headed now and its implications on data analytics. Would you like to talk about that a bit?
Totally. So I think over the last couple of years, we've seen a ton of money flow into the data ecosystem, and it's phenomenal. It's caused unbelievable innovation. Reverse ETL wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. A lot of the data quality, data governance, observability, reliability capabilities that allow teams to call their data platform a product, like, wouldn't exist otherwise. I think what we've seen over the last couple of years is a lot of pieces of a very big puzzle that all need to be strung together separately. Like today, we have an interoperability problem. It is if you were to use the hypothetical modern data stack today and sign up for all the tools today, you're talking probably 20 different tools. One for change data capture, one for ELT, one for long tail ELT, one for tracking plans, one for data collection, one for processing, one for transformation, one for visualization, reverse ETL, XYZ.
Are you all writing this down?
Yeah. So it's like, you need all that stuff. And then it's like, wait a second, like, how do you make, that's the unbundled data stack. Like when you think about the problems of an unbundled data stack, like as a user, that is painful. Like if there's no consistent way for those to operate together, like how do you orchestrate that? Like how do you monitor 20 different tools and how do you make sure all that works? So like, I think one of the biggest things that kind of as the market's changed recently, and as you see that, I think we will start to see whether it's mergers or acquisitions taking place that start to collapse these pieces down. Not to say everything should be one single solution, but looking at the market and not saying, hey, this should be I want to be a company and you want to be a company. It should be, does a user really want two different contracts and two different pieces of technology to get through like their security process and their procurement process? Like that's a pain for the user. Like if you are at a publicly traded company buying data tools today and you need to sign 20 contracts, you are going through a procurement process for 20 tools. So like just that alone can warrant M&A. And I think with valuations, we'll see what happens to valuations, but I think that's one of the key open questions is at what value can you transact in today's market, whether it's through a merger or through an acquisition. And I still don't think we've seen it start yet, but I do expect some of the I do expect transactions to take place to make it hopefully simpler for people.
Yeah, and on my last episode we had Matt Turk of
Total
First Mark Cap, and that was one of the things we're talking about. There's a lot of saturation in the market in terms of for every category you probably have like 10 or 20 well-known vendors, and probably double that in terms of like total number that are relevant in the space. And ultimately, data teams are going to have to figure out like, okay, like do I need this many vendors to solve things that are kind of adjacent to each other, kind of overlap, or are we going to see more consolidation? One of the things that I think is super interesting is that for the really big connectors, like the massive ones, you're seeing like native integrations, like Stripe has like a native Snowflake connector now. Snowflake is putting out a native ServiceNow connector, and I think that is I can't say where that's going to go, but it is a response to the fact that I'm sure that some of the large companies are saying, hey, we're having a lot of trouble integrating these big sources. Yeah,
totally. And that makes a ton of sense. Like when you think about any product, like once you get enough usage and enough adoption, enough revenue out of something and enough reason to hire the engineers to maintain it, if you like, for someone like Stripe, they can afford to do it in-house.
Yeah.
And if they have enough demand for it, which they definitely do, like that is a logical product decision. Like for every one of their customers that wants data inside of Snowflake, if that's the only data, like the problem there is it doesn't solve the problem for the user entirely, because the user needs other data in Snowflake also. So they still need to sign an ELT contract with someone or write their own, use an open source framework to ELT data.
Yeah.
So it doesn't fully alleviate all the pain, but in a world where all someone wants is their Stripe data into Snowflake, it removes the need for another contract. It removes the need for another vendor. It removes the need for more friction in the procurement process, which every little tiny decision we can make as an ecosystem to remove that friction is a win for the ecosystem, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But that is fighting against everyone starting their own companies and wants to be their own product and feature and solution. And that kind of goes counter to the whole consolidation.
Yeah, absolutely. Last point, you're one of the great minds on LinkedIn and data Slack channels. For the data engineers who are listening, what are some other of the great voices that you would recommend people start following if they want to learn more about data engineering?
Totally. I would say it kind of depends on what you're looking for. Kind of early on, like if you want to learn and you want to be exposed. So I would actually say the first place is you go to datacreators.club. It's a whole list of data influencers.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are data science, some are data engineering, some are not. Like I can list off a bunch of people. Someone already did all the work for you. It's
Mm-hmm.
great. Highly recommend it.
Awesome.
Beyond that, there's like the Seattle data guy, Ben Rogojan, is awesome when it comes to just like, how do you get started? How do you learn about analytics? What are the pieces to put in place? One of the few people in the data ecosystem that's really crushing it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Like video content is super engaging, which is why we're here today. So that's one.
Ben's a great guy. He was
and-
also at a Snowflake Summit last week.
Totally. I'm actually going to Denver next week to meet him in person.
Awesome.
Catch up with him in person.
Yeah. Cool.
Joe Reese and Matt over at Turnery also have a great Monday morning data chat.
Yeah.
And then kind of depends on where you want to go. Like Lauren's got her own very, very valuable perspectives on the ecosystem. Lauren Ballack. And like the key part about the data ecosystem is like no one is right or wrong. Like I post things on LinkedIn, like I believe them. I take a pretty harsh stance on some of them, but it's one of those things where like the part to me about having a conversation, whether it's on LinkedIn or in DBT or anywhere in any of these communities, is have the actual discussion. Don't just say, hey, this is my solution, this is my perspective, and I don't want to hear anything else. Like what I really am excited about today, like Chris Tabb posted, like I wrote the modern data stack is dead, and he wrote, no, it's not. And like I like that. Like I like it's the discussion that we all get value out of. It's not the, oh wow, that's a fact. So it's really like I'm trying to think of other people. Like I would check out datacreators.club. And then but it's really like be open to the discussions, like be open to disagree. And like if you post something and someone disagrees, like don't just write it off and be like, I'm not gonna have that conversation. Like that is why we're having these discussions. It is for the disagreements. It's not for all the people, it's not for the wow, that's 100% accurate. Like if I posted every day and everyone was like, that is 100% accurate, like there would not be a discussion taking place right now.
Yeah, I've seen some debates go on in your comments, and they're always healthy and good for the ecosystem to kind of level check set and challenge assumptions. I remember I think it was at Big Data London in 2019, where I don't know if that was the first, but that was one of the first places I saw the modern data stack being coined, and it was basically Snowflake, Looker, and Fivetran all teaming up on a conference presentation, and the whole subject of it was, look how easy it is to build this report. Look how easy it is to load data into Snowflake. Look how and it was all about like data engineering productivity, and that was where we were. And it was a good milestone for the whole data industry for sure to like simplify this stuff, because like 10 years ago it wasn't simple at all. It was very difficult, and especially in the on-prem world. Where things weren't, elastically scalable, and you had to actually think about the on-premise resources that you had, and people would have to spend to handle their peaks. But rather than, being elastic and I'm just paying for my peak usage for, 2 hours a month, it would be like, no, if your peak usage is this much for 2 hours a month, you have to pay for that for the entire, perpetual license duration of this product. So
it is your point about it was so complex and now it was simple when it used to be the modern data stack with an ELT tool, a warehouse, and a visualization tool. It's kind of exploded back out into it's really complex. And now like some of the other conversations I'm really excited about are like the data stack. They need there's a better name for it, but like the data stack in a box solutions, Mozart, Kabula, Y42, these types of platforms where it's like, it's kind of a similar discussion of like, do you really need the 30 tools or do you want something else? And like, I think it's a journey. I think there are scenarios where you need both, but those types of, it's no longer just, hey, here are the 3 tools you need. We're going to have a presentation. And then it's like, is that what you need? Because like you might need something else depending on who you are and where you are. Like maybe there are downsides when it comes to cost or efficiency of doing it one way. And I think right now what we're seeing is people, all different aspects of the ecosystem take perspectives on this and have debates. And it's like that's the exciting part to me.
Awesome. And Ethan, I know you're trying to spearhead a new kind of meetup here in New York. Do you want to tell everyone about that?
Definitely. So one of the things I'm really excited about is having these types of conversations, meeting human beings and talking about data. Yeah. And I posted on LinkedIn today about it, but feel free to reach out directly. And I just want people to get together in a room and have a conversation. So this will not be flashy. It will be very low key. I'm going to come up with a list of people that are in the New York metro area or visiting at a given point in time. I will pick a bar at a point in time and be like, hey, we're all going to go there. People will pay for their own drinks. Like, this is not going to be like, hey, like, here's the big presentation about what this company does. Like, do you want to sign up for it? It's going to just be like, here are data people. They could be practitioners, they could be vendors, they could be investors, they could be people trying to learn SQL, but it's just a forum for people to talk to each other. And that's the type of thing that's why I loved Snowflake Summit last week. Was not I didn't go to any of the sessions to watch the presentations. I went there to talk to the people, and that's what I'm excited about getting started in the New York area.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to sponsor my own presence by buying myself a beer. And
that's how we wanted to. That's how we wanted to.
Maybe I'll buy you a beer too, potentially. But yeah, it sounds great. And I think it's especially in New York, which is just like a lot of action going on, especially in data. I feel like it's becoming like the second data capital.
Totally.
So, well, Ethan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Totally. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Always great talking to you, whether it's in person or over LinkedIn. I'm sure we'll get into some fiery discussions.
100%.
We're there. Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Ethan. Have a great rest of your day. And thank you to everyone for tuning in.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah. Have a good one.